Okay, here's the next assignment, which is textures. One of the things that I wanted to accomplish with this was to have you start using tools besides just the airbrush, because let's face it, the airbrush has limited texture in and of itself. Great if you want something smooth, not so great if you want to pull off something like this. So what I have done is drawn this. A brief explanation of pencils is graphite pencils are great for light lines. However, once you get to a point where if you really start pressing down and to try and get something dark, it becomes really slick and the paint won't stick to it, and you have to put on some type of a workable fixative to be able to have the paint stick. So what I will do is I will use a carbon or light graphite pencil for my light lines, but for something dark I will use charcoal, because charcoal pencils are really dark. The downside is that they're also really easy to smudge. Now at this stage I may or may not want smudging. If I've got something here which is more of the, here's the goal of this, I would want some smudging there. So I would take my finger and move it around a little bit, and that really is a nice effect. It could be done with airbrushing, but I'm a proponent of doing things the easiest way. Now, what I really like to do after this pencil stage is spray it with a workable fixative. You can buy workable fixatives. What I like to use the most is this Liquitex matte medium. The reason why I like it is because I can control the amount so well, and if I want to put a lot of texture on it from some other means, if you put a lot of this on, this will give it something to, it will adhere, but paints and other pencils will actually stick well on top of this. So what I do is, if you mix this more than 50%, it says it will start to get cloudy. So I will mix it pretty much just thinly enough to get it through the airbrush. And then I will spray that over everything. And this is where you will definitely want a dent or a matte, so you don't fill your lungs with art material. Back in the 70s, so much airbrush art was being done. I remember a couple of reports of how an airbrush artist had died, and they did an autopsy and they found his lungs, the bottom of his lungs were just filled with acrylic paint, and so be mindful of that. And once that dries, which should be almost instantaneously if you sprayed it at the right thickness, then you're pretty good to go. Now, the beauty of this is you've established your darks, and for this wood texture, I will mix a brown. And all I really have to do is give a light coat. And it's already starting to look like wood to me. I have found that however dark I choose to make the drawing, it's good to be mindful of what color of paint you're spraying on top of it. Even if you're spraying a brown like I am, it's still going to change the charcoal. If you're spraying black on it, obviously it's going to get darker. But let's just say you're spraying a yellow, for example. It's going to make what is now black a lot lighter. So you want to keep that in mind. Ahead of time, in deciding how dark you want to make it. I want this to be fairly dark, so I'm really using a lot of paint to make it. Apologies for the extra time. Now at this point, I may want to change the color in some little areas here. Now for this assignment, I'm not requiring that you use color, but I am encouraging it at this point. So I'm going to look at my reference and think, oh, okay, I've got this area that's a little bit darker over here. I want to follow some areas like a little bit of color. Again, if I want more texture, there's always some kind of worms in wood. So I'm pulling the needle back and then just spraying speckles. I'm sure you can't see it, but it's just a way of adding more and more texture. Boy, I really got to get a lot on there. But just to have more variety, I'm going to take a little bit of yellow to put some warmer areas, because as much variety as I can put in this just creates more visual interest. Because I like to work in opposites on the color wheel, to also create more visual interest, since most of what I have there is warm, what I will spray for the shadows, I've got the light parts that are warmer, so the opposite on the color wheel is going to be something cooler, and the opposite of yellow is purple, obviously, and I'm using a pretty bright purple here. But since I know I'm mixing the colors here on the surface, it's not going to end up being a bright purple. If I were to just directly spray it, that's a pretty bright. But what I'm doing is just looking for some other areas to darken. Now, that's pretty complete, actually. So now that I have the darks established with the pencils, the midtones, for lack of a better terminology, is provided by the color, the only thing that's really left are the highlights. And for that, I would, if it were on my own, I would use a Prismacolor pencil. They provide great color. Or, in this case, I'm going to use paint. By a brush. A little bit darker and a little bit warmer. I could apply this with glazes, or be pretty direct. And by direct, it means the color that I'm mixing is the color it's going to stay when it dries. And one of the things that I learned from an artist that worked at Disney, was a background painter, was the importance of variety. Every shape, every mark that you make with the brush or pencil, you want to have variety. So if I'm going like this, in one area, I may want to stipple it somewhere else, change the shape, or this is a square brush, a flat brush rather. And if I'm going to apply it a fair amount in some areas, I may just do it a tiny little bit in others. If it's a little bit too strong of a highlight, I can always glaze over it again with the airbrush color. I find the exact opposite to be true when I'm painting highlights and drawing as I do with the airbrush. When I'm applying color with the airbrush, it always seems darker, and I should be a lot more light-handed. But for me, I find the opposite true when I'm painting, in that because I'm so focused and I know what I'm doing and I know what I want it to look like, I'm hypersensitive to it. But I think it was Norman Rockwell that told me the analogy, I could be wrong, of throwing a ball at a wall. And if painting is like throwing a ball at a wall, The artist is throwing the ball, but the viewer is the wall. And by hitting the ball reduces its speed. So what that means is, if you want your artwork to have a particular visual impact or something in your artwork, let's just call it if you want your artwork to have an impact of 5, then you need to throw the ball at the wall at an 8 or a 10. So if that makes sense. So in my mind, it's contrast, it's color, it's value. I want to overstate it a little bit to my own eye, so that the viewer can have the intended strength. Okay, I could work on that forever, depending on how detailed I wanted it. I will also squint a lot and think, wow, I could probably make those contrasts even lighter. At this point, I could go in and make some areas darker if I want more control with the airbrush, or with the brush than I can get with the airbrush, the painted brush here. I can go in and work back and forth with the values. And so very quickly, you can create a nice texture. So there's the wood.